My Aunt Jane died last Sunday. In a few minutes before she died, the chaplain came in and he asked what was she like before she came to the hospital. And one of her sisters said, she had a head injury. She came in and she's been having trouble this year. And then another sister said, she didn't have children of her own, but she was like a second mother to all her nieces and nephews, her children. And they're right. They're absolutely right. She was like a second mother. She was also like a big sister. Absolutely right. And I thought I gave a good answer because I told him, she was funny and she was loud. But the person that gave the best answer was Mike. And he told the chaplain she taught 4th grade. And she acted like a 4th grader. And he's right. She was fun, and she was silly, and she liked to laugh, and she was everything that when we were in 4th grade we remember. She embraced life and she lived in the moment. She loved silly movies, and when I say silly movies, I mean the more stupid, the better. Dumb and Dumber. She took me when I was very young to see Every Which Way But Loose, because who doesn't love Clint Eastwood and the orangutan? I showed my kids the movie. I sat them down and made them watch it 30 years later. I'm not sure if they understood why it was so funny. But that was Jane. And speaking of stupid movies, most of you are too young to remember disco. And there were these two movies, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive, and they made John Travolta a sex symbol in the 80s and in the 70s. And when I was 15 years old, she took me to see Staying Alive, the sequel. And one of the scenes in both of those movies is iconic. And at the time I'm 15 and I'm shy and I'm awkward and I don't want anybody to notice me. And we go to a crowded theater to watch Staying Alive, and the iconic scene is that John Travolta is walking down the street and he's strutting his stuff. He is strutting. And the Bee Gees are playing in the background, and they're singing, "You can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man, no time to talk." And I'm sitting there, 15 years old, and Jane jumps up and she yells, "You go!" I slowly slid into the pool. You heard about how much she loved the holidays, and I'll say she loved the holidays, and she was glitter at Christmas time. And she would come to our house for Christmas, and for weeks thereafter, everywhere she sat in our house, off the furniture. Angie told me a story this week about Christmas, and she is driving Angie somewhere, and they're going through Hartselle, and all of a sudden they look up and they notice there's this car creeping along right in front of them. There's, somebody behind them that's just creeping along, and there are people on the sidewalks alongside. And she has driven into the Hartselle Christmas parade. She would, get out of the parade, but not Jane, because she just drove along like she belonged. Talked about the holidays, and I think Jonathan did a great job of saying how much she loved it. And she loved Christmas, she loved Halloween, and she would set up hay rides for our family so that we could all enjoy, and that the children in particular could be embraced. Jane was perfume and lipstick. We were in front of the casket earlier, and we talked to somebody about the fact that she would have said, that's not enough lipstick, because there's never enough lipstick. And when my oldest son was little, she would babysit sometimes, and we would come home, and he would be covered with lipstick and smell like her perfume. And, it just made you remember who she was. And a bad thing about Jane is that she would lie about her cooking. If you're not a member of the family, you probably wouldn't know this, but she would go to Kroger for every single family event, and she would buy a cake, or she would buy a pie. But she wouldn't just bring a Kroger cake or pie, she would put it on a plate and pretend like she cooked it, and she would walk through the door and talk about, I had stayed up all night. Angie actually, again, told me that there was one time that she came to something and she had bought a Kroger cake and she put it on a plate. And somebody else brought the same cake, but theirs was in the Kroger package. And so they ate all of Jane's and the other one didn't get touched. Just a minor thing is she was so proud. I love the picture from when she was at my parents' wedding. She was so proud to be the only member of her family who could get a suntan. And she would take the kids to the pool and she would sit out in the sun for hours and hours. This was a younger Jane, obviously. But I love the fact that she was proud of being the only person in a 7-member family who could get a suntan. She loved kids. And for 50 years, most of my life, even when she was only 20, 22 years old, she would set up skits or pageants for every holiday. And if you were a stranger child, you came with somebody who wasn't necessarily immediately involved in the family, she would pull you in too. You would end up wearing a costume and have a towel as a hat, or there's no telling what you would end up wearing. I think some of the costumes came from her classroom. But she would be at one end of the house with the kids, and I'll say her sisters were down at the other end of the house doing all the work with the kitchen and cooking. She was generous to a fault, but she was also a terrible procrastinator. So there is not a single Christmas Eve that I remember that she was not late, because she would make a stop at Walmart to make sure that every child there had a gift. Now, it might not be what they wanted, but she would come in with a gift, and she would stop at Walmart and be late every single year. She loved everybody. She loved her family, she loved her students, she loved her friends and the people around her. But she liked some people more. She liked the people that she could tease with. She liked the people Katie's dad I was talking to earlier. She loved cutting up with him, and she would say stuff in a loving way, but joking with him. But she wanted you to joke back. She wanted you to give as good as you got. And that was one of her great traits. Jane helped teach me to live in the moment. She helped teach me not to wait for tomorrow. I think today there is a little less laughter and a little less joy. But I'm going to remember her. And when I do, I'm going to think silly thoughts. And I would urge all of you to help with the laughter that we're missing.